Buenos Aires, December 2018. At the edge of Ministro Pistarini International Airport, the night hums with a low metallic pulse, conveyor belts, hydraulic lifts, and the sharp click of customs seals breaking open. Inside the Russian embassy's annex, under the washed-out glare of fluorescent light, 6 black leather suitcases sit stacked neatly near the back wall. They've been here for over a year, marked as diplomatic cargo. Untouchable. Unchecked. A faint smell of leather lingers, mixed with something else. Chemical. Sweet. Customs Agent Inspector Hernan Del Rio walks a slow circle around the luggage. His gloved hand brushes over one of the tags, embossed with the Russian coat of arms. He squints. It's slightly worn. Like it's been handled too many times. "Sir, what's in these?" he asks the embassy aide beside him. "Documents," the man replies in Spanish, voice too flat, eyes too still. Outside, the wind shifts. A cargo jet takes off, engines roaring across the runway, its sound fading into the night like a warning that no one hears. Within the hour, Del Rio orders a discreet scan. And when the X-ray machine flickers to life, everyone in the room leans closer. Inside, wrapped in layers of brown plastic and insulation foam, lie bricks, dozens of them. The machine outlines the shape in bright orange-red. Del Rio stares. This isn't paper. The silence that follows feels endless. By dawn, word reaches the ministry. The suitcases are seized under quiet orders. The embassy denies everything. But the weight, the truth, has already been recorded. 389 kilograms. Pure cocaine. Value, over $60 million on the European market. No gunfire. No chase. Just 6 silent suitcases. And behind them, a trail of immunity, corruption, and death that no one would officially acknowledge. The Russian embassy's storage building was built in the 1970s, concrete walls, steel doors, a faint hum of climate control that never turned off. Inside, diplomatic pouches, letters, and crates sat in labeled corners, mostly forgotten. But one section, the Western Bay, was different. Security cameras covered every angle except one, the far corner behind a metal shelf stacked with unused flags and ceremony folders. That's where the 6 suitcases were kept. Each locked with brass hardware. Each tagged with the word confidential. For 14 months, no one signed them out. No one inquired. No one asked questions, until a janitor named Pablo Cortez noticed one had shifted slightly. He was sweeping when he felt it, a drag mark across the floor, small but fresh. The case was heavier than he remembered. He reported it to the embassy's logistics officer, Oleg Varnin, who waved him off. "Leave it. Those are not your concern." But something about Oleg's tone, rehearsed, anxious, made Pablo curious. That night, when everyone left, he returned with his phone's flashlight. He pressed his ear against the case and heard the faint rattle of something granular, dense, like shifting sand. When he whispered this to his cousin, who worked part-time in customs, the whisper became a message. That message reached someone who decided to act. Diplomatic cargo is sacred. It moves untouched through customs, through scanners, through suspicion. To open one without permission is to risk international incident. The Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, 1961, a perfect shield for smugglers who understand the law better than the enforcers. By January 2018, the 6 black cases had already been listed under official documentation for transfer back to Moscow. Routine. Innocent. But the person who filed the paperwork wasn't the ambassador. It was an aide, Andrei Koval, a mid-level operations clerk with access to the embassy's logistics registry. Koval was quiet, precise, and entirely unremarkable, except for one habit. Every Friday, he received a phone call from a disposable number. Always under 3 minutes. Always ending with a single phrase in Russian, "The snow is ready." The phrase didn't make sense at first. But when investigators replayed wiretaps months later, the pattern was unmistakable. The snow was cocaine. Shipments had already passed unnoticed, small packages, then boxes. Now, it was an industrial scale. Hundreds of kilograms sealed under diplomatic immunity, hidden in the cleanest space imaginable. The tip reached the Argentine Federal Police through unofficial channels. The message was simple: check the Russian embassy's basement. 6 bags. False seals. Inspector Del Rio assembled a small, hand-picked team. They didn't inform the embassy in advance. Doing so would mean the cargo would vanish. At 3:15 a.m., unmarked vehicles rolled into the embassy's side entrance. Lights off. Radio silent. The air was damp, heavy with old paint. They moved quietly through the halls, boots barely echoing on the marble. When they reached the storage area, Del Rio nodded. "Open them." Bolt cutters cracked the locks. The sound was deafening in the silence. When the first suitcase opened, plastic fumes filled the air. Inside, dozens of tightly wrapped packages, each stamped with a red scorpion emblem. He sliced one open with a knife. Fine white powder spilled across the black floor. Del Rio didn't speak. He simply stepped back, his hand tightening around the flashlight. One of the officers whispered, "Señor, esto no es azúcar." "Sir, this isn't sugar." The next 24 hours were chaos behind closed doors. The Argentine government contacted the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Both sides wanted it quiet. Too quiet. But the evidence was undeniable: 389 kilograms. Street value, nearly $61 million. Inside the embassy, Koval disappeared. His apartment was cleared before dawn. Phone disconnected. Car abandoned. In Moscow, his name was never mentioned again. The cameras that recorded the raid went missing. A backup copy surfaced weeks later, the footage grainy, time-stamped, showing silhouettes moving around the open cases. You could see Del Rio step back from the pile, shaking his head. One voice murmured off camera, "Who are we really dealing with?" Behind the embassy's facade was a network that stretched from Buenos Aires to Berlin. Flights listed as diplomatic cargo had been moving small quantities of cocaine for over a decade. Each time, the handlers changed: embassy aides, clerks, sometimes even airline staff. But the brain was always the same: a broker named Semyon Pakamov, an ex-intelligence officer turned fixer. He understood two things. Diplomatic bags were sacred. No one ever scanned them. He used that loophole to move hundreds of kilos monthly, wrapped in coded manifests and fake paperwork. Each shipment looked legal. Each suitcase weighed just enough to seem ordinary. When Pakamov learned about the bust, he didn't panic. He laughed. Then he called a contact in Germany and said only one phrase: "Cut the line." Within 48 hours, 4 people disappeared. 2 in Berlin. 1 in Buenos Aires. 1 in Moscow. The betrayal came from inside. The janitor's cousin, the one who'd passed the tip, had received $10,000 from an unknown account. The payment was traced back to a Russian dissident network operating in exile. They wanted exposure, not money. For them, this wasn't about drugs. It was about power. They wanted to humiliate a system that thought itself untouchable. When Argentine media broke the story weeks later, headlines called it the embassy cocaine case. Images of the seized suitcases flooded screens. But Koval, Varnin, and Pakamov were ghosts. Even the informant who started it all, Pablo, vanished. His apartment was found empty, his phone crushed, his car parked 2 blocks away. 3 months after the embassy raid, Buenos Aires tried to forget. The story had already become old news, replaced by politics, football, and the next scandal. But for Inspector Hernán del Rio, the silence was heavier than the headlines. He sat behind a new desk, far from the airport where it all began. No more raids. No more night operations. Just paperwork and filtered coffee. Yet on the corner of his desk sat a single photograph, the one taken the morning after the seizure. The photo showed the 6 black suitcases lined up on the embassy floor, marked with white chalk numbers 1 through 6. And there, on the far right edge of the frame, half in shadow, was something that didn't fit the count. A 7th case. He'd seen it that night, smaller, older, its leather cracked near the handle. He remembered brushing dust off it before the camera flash went off. But afterward, when the inventory was logged, only 6 were listed. He'd brought it up once, offhand, during a debrief. His superior, Captain Morales, didn't even look up from his file. There were 6, Hernán. 6 and only 6. But I saw 7. Morales exhaled slowly. Then maybe you need rest. After that, Del Rio stopped asking. But something gnawed at him. He began reviewing the evidence archive. Days turned into weeks as he combed through digital records, manifests, chain of custody forms. Every file matched, except one. Case 3 had 2 conflicting weights. One log listed it at 58.2 kilograms. Another at 64.9. A 6-kilo difference, just enough for a smaller suitcase. He followed the digital trail to an evidence warehouse in Ezeiza, near the airport. The clerk there, a thin man with hollow eyes and a nicotine cough, shrugged when asked. Maybe it was transferred, he said, lighting another cigarette. To where? Who knows? Russia took back some diplomatic material weeks ago. Could have been mixed. That word, mixed, landed like a bullet. Del Rio drove home that night through the rain, windshield wipers slashing back and forth in a hypnotic rhythm. He tried to push it away, but his mind replayed the same sequence. 6 cases lined up in chalk, one half visible in shadow, the embassy's brass seal gleaming faintly under cold fluorescent light. By the time he reached his apartment, his phone buzzed. A blocked number. He hesitated, then answered. A man's voice, low and calm, spoke in Spanish with a foreign accent. Señor Del Rio. You are looking in the wrong direction. It was never about cocaine. Click. The line went dead. He stared at the screen. The call lasted 14 seconds. The next day, Del Rio arrived at work to find a memo on his desk. Reassignment effective immediately. No further contact with the embassy case. His badge access to the evidence system was revoked by noon. He sat there for a long time, staring at the computer screen, his reflection ghosted in the dark monitor. In Moscow, meanwhile, the Russian Foreign Ministry released a quiet statement. The individuals responsible for the misuse of diplomatic facilities have been identified and appropriately sanctioned. No names. No images. No public record. 3 days later, in a remote village outside Ryazan, a car was found burnt in a forest road. Inside were the charred remains of a man later identified as Andrei Koval, the embassy aide who filed the shipment. Dental records matched. The cause of death was listed as accidental vehicle fire. But local reporters noted something strange: the car's fuel tank was intact. It hadn't exploded from within. It had been doused. Koval's last known contact was a call from a Berlin number traced to a logistics firm, one owned by Pakimov's holding company. A week after that, Pakimov himself disappeared. His penthouse in St. Petersburg was found empty, the security system disabled. On the marble counter, a single object sat under a folded newspaper. A brass key, the kind used for locking embassy trunks. Interpol issued a notice. No trace. By spring, all mentions of the case had been scrubbed from official Argentinian records. The media archive links led to blank pages or broken redirects. It was as if the story had never happened. But Del Rio couldn't forget. He started keeping notes again, not in a police file, but in a small black journal, hidden behind a loose panel in his apartment wall. Dates, times, cross-references, and one recurring phrase written in red ink. Find the seventh case. At night, he'd replay the footage he'd salvaged, the grainy, flickering video from the embassy basement. Each time, he'd freeze the frame at the far edge, zooming in until the pixels bled together. The outline was faint but unmistakable. 7. He'd lean back, exhale, and whisper to no one. They never left it behind. They planted it. Because what if the seventh case wasn't an oversight, but a signal? A message. A swap. Something that was never meant to be cocaine at all. The years passed quietly. Airports changed their scanners. Diplomats changed their titles. But some stories never find closure, only shadows. The Diplomat suitcase remains a study in quiet corruption, a crime without fingerprints, conducted through procedure and trust. When journalists look back, they see the headlines, cocaine in Russian embassy. But beneath that headline is something darker, an ecosystem that thrives on secrecy, legal immunity, and silence bought in diplomatic tone. Del Rio retired early, long before his pension vested. He moved south, near the coast, where cargo ships still hum across the Atlantic horizon. Sometimes, when he walks by the docks, he sees the same color of luggage being loaded onto freighters, black leather, brass locks, identical. And he wonders if another story is about to begin. He never speaks publicly about the case. But in one interview, years later, he said this. The cocaine was not the real story. The drugs were just the smoke. What was inside the seventh case, that's what scared them. No one knows what he meant. But his words linger, an echo in a world of sealed borders and silent deals. The cocaine might have been destroyed. The files erased. But the system that made it possible still breathes, in the diplomatic pouches, in the corridors of immunity, in the sealed smiles of men who know that paperwork can hide anything. Somewhere, in a cold storage warehouse outside Moscow, under a layer of dust, sits an unmarked suitcase. Its lock rusted. Its tag blank. And maybe, just maybe, inside it lies not drugs, but documents, names, proof, the kind of truth that could fracture alliances. Until someone opens it, it remains what it has always been, a container of silence.